Hi, I'm Dr. Jonathan Clark, and I'm a board-certified chiropractic neurologist. I'm also a member of the International Association of Functional Neurology and Rehabilitation. I've been trained and worked with the author of this book, Disconnected Kids, by Dr. Robert Malello, who is, again, the founder of Brain Balance Centers and the author of this book. If you're suffering, or if you have a child or know someone as a child who's suffering from this disorder, we're going to talk about what we do in our office that makes us different. I want to let you know that no stone is left unturned for us to determine the exact cause and how to treat these conditions properly. So we're dealing with ADHD, autism spectrum disorders, dyslexia, and childhood developmental disorders. So some statistics about these kind of conditions. Number one, 16 million kids are diagnosed with severe attentional, behavioral, and learning problems. Thousands more every day are diagnosed with these ADHD, autism, Asperger's, etc. In 1999, a little over 10 years ago, 1 in 10,000 kids were diagnosed with autism. Today it's about 1 in 150. There's been a drastic increase, and we really don't know why, but we do have a lot of contributing factors which I'm going to talk about. But as far as pinpointing one thing, at this stage we don't know exactly the main thing that's causing it, but we know it's been growing and escalating drastically all over the world even, but also specifically in the US. So some statistic about this is, number one, the treatments really haven't changed since the 1950s until some of the stuff that's being researched and that's happening now. So what we do in our office is we look at the big picture, and we also analyze abnormal neurology. We look at nutritional issues such as food allergies, sensitivities, wheat intolerances, dairy intolerances, leaky gut issues. We look at physiology as well. So we try and put all the pieces of the puzzle together to determine what exactly is the cause and what's going on with this child's individual condition. So again, when we look at reactions to food, some simple examples, we look at wheat sensitivity. A lot of you are probably familiar with this. Maybe you've already tried something like this. We look at dairy sensitivity. We look at soy sensitivity, yeast issues. We got to see, is this contributing to this neurological imbalance? This is one part of the program and part of what we do in here. So our treatment consists of, again, nutrition, performing pretty intense therapy at home as well as in the office. And it's not a cookie-cutter treatment. Every child is unique with their own unique challenges, and that's what we need to address, and that's what we need to focus on. But the brain's got to learn through timing, repetition, focus, and predictability. So what is really the cause of this stuff that's going on? And the research is starting to really come out and trickle out as far as what's going on with these kids' brains, why they're suffering, and why things aren't activating properly. Research is showing that there's parts of the brain that are actually understimulated, and they're not as developed or as mature as maybe other parts of the brain. So maybe it might be kind of difficult for you parents out there that have an ADHD kid that has the hyperactivity aspect of ADHD, but actually part of the brains are not working properly, they're understimulated. We'll get more to that in a minute. So what's causing the increase? We're not really sure, but we know things that are contributing to it. Lack of physical exercise is huge, folks. By the year 2050, 1 in 3 children will become diabetic, which is an astounding number. Overweight and obesity are rampant. Absentee parenting is an issue with this as well. The change in technology such as TV and computer games. Stress during pregnancy. We're at a time in our lives where stress during pregnancy and nutritional stress, obviously social stress, these things are playing a role, and it's being passed on to the individual, the child. The stressful lifestyles we lead, the environmental toxins, obviously nutrition. Again, 90% of the food we consume as Americans is processed. That's not good. We can't build healthy cells and healthy lifestyles when we're consuming food that's processed. 2 things are really needed for the brain to activate and work properly. It needs proper fuel supply, and it needs activated properly in the right manner at the right time. So these are the things that the body really thrives on. So what we're talking about when we're dealing with these kind of conditions is what we call something called functional disconnection syndrome. And the way I like to describe this, rather, is taking an orchestra. And if we have maybe this side over here would be our woodwind section, and this side over here might be our brass section. And when they play together and they play at the same time, it's harmoniously and it sounds right, and everyone's on the same page. Again, the beat's the same. But sometimes, if something would happen, maybe that the brass section might be a little bit behind, or they might be playing a little bit too loud. It would sound chaotic or not right. So we've got a couple different ways we can handle this. If the brass section over here is playing too slow, we could just speed up this whole section over here, which might make it sound a little better, but doesn't necessarily fix the problem. We want to hone in on more, particularly that section of the orchestra to make it work more properly again. So things are more cohesive as a unit. This is well documented in the literature, folks. This is the new stuff that's coming out. And we liken this to the left and the right brain not communicating properly, not functioning properly at the same time in the same manner. Another way to describe it is if you had two computers in your house and they were linked together. And one might be a brand new 2010 computer and one might be you bought back in 1995. They both can get the job done, but obviously the 2010 computer is going to be a lot more quick, a lot more efficient, and the other one's going to be lagging behind a bit. So it can be the same kind of thing in the brain where one side of the brain is activated and working much more better than the other, or is more developed than the other, and the other side is just lagging behind or not working properly. So again, taking the left side, right side, if this is the left side of our brain, right side of our brain, the left might be dominant, the right might be weak. So the brain balance therapy that we do in our office helps to balance out these areas and work on these kind of skills. So when we're looking at these areas, there's some characteristics of left brain, there's some characteristics of right brain which are pretty well established. The left brain is our gas pedal, which initiates thoughts, initiates movements, makes things want to go. Okay? It's also interested in very small, detailed things, fine motor skills. That's very left brain oriented. Right brain, that's more of our big picture. Okay? It's also our brake pedal. It stops the things, it stops the movements. It looks at the whole picture, and it has a lot to do with gross motor muscle development as well and control. So left brain is involved in a lot of early academics. It's obviously involved in our verbal communication because of our Broca speech area, primarily on the left side. It likes routine. It likes rote memorization. It really likes those high-frequency video games. It's stimulated by those high-frequency video games. Whereas the right brain is our social part of our brain. It's our nonverbal communication, which is actually the very first part of communication that develops as a child, is nonverbal cues. Case in point, when a mother has her child and she's looking at her child and she giggles and laughs, and the child mirrors that image, that's nonverbal communication that has to establish and be established before you can develop those more left brain characteristics. So that's our social aspect, is our right brain. It likes new things. It likes low frequency nature sounds. The right brain does as well. When we're dealing with what we call functional disconnection syndrome, we know that primarily just dealing with that information, that if we have more of an ADHD type individual, if we have more of an Asperger's, an autism spectrum disorder type thing, an OCD thing, or a Tourette's, that's primarily going to involve the right side of our brain, primarily. Not always, but usually. If we have more of a dyslexia type thing going on, or a dyspraxia, fine motor skills, handwriting issues, that's primarily a left brain dysfunction, or not working as well as the other. So again, what brain balance therapy is, we find out which areas are not working properly, and we prescribe coordinated exercises and therapies based on that information from a hemispheric approach. The traditional approaches that are out there right now, I'm sure you're all aware of, is the first thing is medication. Ritalin, Adderall, Concerta. These try to increase activity of the brain, but they're only effective while you're taking them. This is obviously, things like Ritalin causes a 500% increase in the risk of sudden death in an FDA-funded study. Folks, this is staggering side effects that we want to try and avoid. It can increase blood pressure, tremors, muscle spasm, can cause psychotic symptoms. It's going to suppress growth as well. It's not really addressing the cause, and it's focusing on addressing the brain from a global perspective, whereas we're focused on addressing the brain from a hemispheric perspective. So just some facts about ADD and ADHD. These adolescents are four times more likely to be involved in a fatal car accident compared to those that don't have it. Adult ADHD can lead to risky social behavior in the future, inappropriate relationships as well. With medications, after 1 year, 80% of kids are no longer taking them due to the side effects or really not seeing any benefits. So there's definitely side effects or dangers to having this type of disorder. Out of 100 people with ADHD, 35 aren't going to finish high school, 25 are going to repeat at least 1 grade, 52 are abusing drugs or alcohol, 40 have tried alcohol and tobacco at an early age, 75 have interpersonal problems, 30 have engaged in theft. The list goes on. There's a lot of things associated with these kind of conditions. Numerous studies show that approximately 50% of inmates have been found to have ADHD. They have a higher percentage of getting in motor vehicle accidents, speeding tickets, suspended licenses. Autism, ADHD, autism just 10 years ago was 1 in 10,000. Today it's 1 in 150, and the average cost to a family with an autistic child is about $35,000, which is a staggering number. Folks, this is just to maintain the problem. This isn't to correct it. This is just to basically maintain the problem with the organic foods and the things that they're doing differently. Last year there was over 20 million prescriptions for Ritalin, and there was that's an 800% increase from 1990 to 1998. So again, this is just to manage the problems, it's not to correct the issue. So again, ADHD about 15 to 20K per year to work on this problem, to manage it. Autism is about 35,000 a year just to manage it, not to fix the problem. So our goal with the therapy we do is basically to get these underactive areas of the brain, or these primitive areas which we like to describe, to become more developed, okay? To get that calculator, the light of the calculator, to turn on and become more bright. That's what we're looking at here. But the child's success is really dependent on the parents' commitment. And that's the kind of parents we work with here, is the parents that are committed to getting their children better. So the type of treatment that we offer in here is a bunch of different things. And it all depends on what we find in the physical examination and the neurological workup. It can be olfactory stimulation, which is smell therapy. We know different smells stimulate different areas of the brain. If we want to fire the right brain, we want more of a pungent smell. If we want to fire more of the left brain, we want more of a pleasant smell. Visual stimulation. We use eye light therapy. We use visual exercises that we use as well, specific to the area. Auditory stimulation or hearing stimulation. Cerebellar, vestibular, balance training. These are very important exercises that fire up the brain, part of those weak areas. We do gross motor and postural rehabilitative exercises. We utilize the interactive metronome. You can go to interactivemetronome.com to learn more about it, but this is a computerized device where basically the child wears a headset here and he hears a tone, a cowbell, and he has to touch a hand trigger or a foot trigger to the time of the metronome. It sounds easy. Okay, it sounds real easy, but this is focusing on controlling the brain's impulsivity, timing, and repetition. This helps build that frontal lobe. The more we can build that frontal lobe, the more we can suppress some of this primitive activity that's going on in the brain and develop a more advanced brain. So the benefits of interactive metronome: promotes attention and focus change, motor control and coordination, balance and gait improvement, language processing, control of aggression and impulsivity as well. What they found from the early clinical trials, they did some functional MRI scans on individuals using the interactive metronome, and it's focusing on and training the cingulate gyrus, areas called the basal ganglia, which controls our motor output and unwanted motor output as well, controls cerebellum and activates cerebellum. So the motor activity areas is what this is working on. And this is currently being used by thousands of therapists in hospitals and clinics across the country. So most of our genes are there to build our brain, but when kids are born they don't have a brain yet, so they have to develop their frontal lobe. And the experiences they go through in their lifetime helps them develop that frontal lobe. But timing is how we link these areas together, and this can be disrupted by abnormal timing in the motor system. So really what's going on here is there's problems with motor system. We need to develop the motor system properly, just like we talked about the nonverbal cues from the mother, okay? We have to develop this before we can develop something else. It builds on top of everything else. One of the main things we look at in our office as well is primitive reflexes. Primitive reflexes are something that's there when you're born that don't really require a brain. It's an automatic response. They allow us to move, interact, and provide sensory stimulus to the brain. So one of the primitive reflexes that you're probably familiar with is a startle reflex. When you have a loud noise or a sound go off around a baby, they startle like that. That's a primitive reflex is there. But as we get older, we should be able to suppress a lot of these primitive reflexes because our frontal lobe is more developed. Well, the problem is we're finding these primitive reflexes still in kids that are 5, 6, 10, 13. I even see these adults in my office. And what that's telling us is that area of the brain has never been able to fully develop because it's still in a primitive stage, folks. We need to remediate those primitive reflexes. That's very important. If you have simple movements, you have a simple brain. More complex movements equals a more complex brain. Hand dominance, eye dominance, ear dominance, foot dominance. We should have some kind of clear-cut dominance from children. If they're mixed dominance, that tells us the brain is never really lateralized. It's another sign of an immature brain. So if they don't have a hand dominance before the age of 1, they're probably going to have a weakness on the opposite side. So by the end of the second year, there really should be a clear-cut dominance to what's going on with this child.